Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at Season 9 of Smallville. So in this season, Clark begins his training with Jor-El while also dealing with the arrival of Zod on Earth. Yes, that Zod. So Season 9 is one of my absolute favorite seasons in the entire show. And by watching it, it's amazing to see how much the show has changed and evolved over time. And believe it or not, this season could have actually ended up being the last one. Not for artistic reasons, but due to low ratings. From this season onwards, the show was moved to what is known as the death slot, which is basically Friday nights at 8. Any TV show that has plummeting ratings is basically sent into that slot to just die, basically. I think at one point they moved Supernatural to that slot, but it eventually recovered. And if the show were to be cancelled by this season, apparently a different ending was planned so that Clark Kent could become Superman and the show would just end there. But thankfully that didn't happen. I'm sure we'll find out one day what that ending would have been because it sounds interesting. But anyway, let's get into it. So first of all, Clark is beginning his trials with Jor-El. It seems weird that he's doing this so late into the show, but that's what you get for constantly running away from your destiny all the time, so it makes sense. Given how the entire show has played out leading up to this point, he now considers his human emotions to be a distraction from his destiny. And he even takes his superhero persona into a somewhat obsessive territory. And I even like his new outfit. It's not the suit, but it'll do for now. You know, it's very polarizing among fans. Some people like it, and then other people try to pass it off as just Matrix cosplay. The Matrix, we'll talk about that later. But considering where he ends up at the end of the season, this was a really good arc for the character. And it actually feels as if he's Superman already, even though he doesn't have the suit yet. As for Lois, given how the Season 8 finale played out, she begins to have sporadic visions of the future every once in a while. And Season 8 also set up the idea of her maintaining a walking relationship with the Blur, not knowing that it's actually Clark. As a result of Clark's trials, Chloe's friendship with him begins to deteriorate this season, and she spends a lot of time working with Dr. Emil Hamilton in the Watchtower. Not Dr. Steve Hamilton from Season 1, this is a different Hamilton, and it's unclear as to whether or not these two Hamiltons are related. That question's never really been answered. If the Watchtower sounds familiar, it's basically the headquarters of the Justice League. In other media, it would be in space, basically. It would be a space station. But here, it's a giant building. It's kind of like a skyscraper. In the realm of Smallville, it kind of makes sense for the Watchtower to be, well, what it is, an actual tower. But even the classic Watchtower isn't too far-fetched. Oliver also had a pretty solid arc this season. Due to Clark's commitments to his trials, Oliver feels demotivated to continue being Green Arrow, and it sends him into a deterioration of his own. But as the series progresses, a series of events motivates him to put the suit back on and embrace his superhero identity again. Tess had some really interesting stuff to do this season. She's after Lois's memories, given that Lois has been having visions of the future. These memories could potentially tie in with the potential destruction of Earth. But much like Lionel Luthor before her, she's a very morally grey and ambiguous character. Not necessarily good or evil, if you will. So let's talk about the villains, starting off with the main antagonist, and in my opinion, one of the best villains in Smallville history, Zod. Major Zod, because he's not General Zod yet. And honestly, all I can say about this guy is kneel before Zod. 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 Okay, I need to stop with that. I'm getting excited just talking about Zod. Noble for Zod. You see, growing up, I was absolutely obsessed with General Zod, particularly Terrence Stamp's portrayal of the character. Then I came across Michael Shannon's portrayal of Zod in Man of Steel, and it's also a brilliant portrayal of the character. I had no idea that Zod was actually in Smallville, and I was excited, so when I watched the show in its entirety last year, I couldn't wait to see him, and I was just blown away. And I have to say, Callum Blue's Zod is the best Zod since Terrence Stamp. The show had been building up to his arrival for quite some time, and the only reason they had brought him onto the season is because they had killed off a couple of characters in season 8 and they weren't sure which villain to use as the main antagonist, so they just went with Zod. And while Terrence Stamp's performance is the most iconic when it comes to Zod, I think this iteration of Zod is much more three-dimensional. His backstory on Kandor revolving around his history with Jor-El, the fact that he and the other Kandorians who arrive on Earth are all powerless from the get-go, his fear of being feared among society, which in turn results in his desire for society to kneel to him, as well as his vision for the future and his affiliations with Tess. And yes, he will say the line, "Kneel before Zod." You just have to be patient for that though. There's even some political subtext regarding Zod and the Kandorians in general. You know, there are themes of immigration, terrorism, 9/11, Islamophobia, all that kind of stuff. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice it. It was an interesting new take on the character while also paying homage to what came before. There's also a shadowy organization by the name of Checkmate that is trying to control all superheroes. There's also Metallo, played by Brian Austin Green. I do like this new take on the character, but it's kind of hard to ignore the fact that his kryptonite heart is obviously just a ripoff of Iron Man's arc reactor. I wonder why. There's also some other returning characters who I forgot to mention in my Season 8 review. The Toyman, a DC villain, and Zatanna. These characters made their debuts in Season 8 and they returned for Season 9. There's also a physical iteration of Jor-El played by Julian Sands. Given Julian Sands' track record of playing more villainous roles, I think he played Jor-El pretty well, considering Jor-El's not really a villain. And there's even special guest appearances by Martha Kent and Perry White. As you've probably realized throughout these reviews, the show became more and more serialized as time went by. I mean, the last 2 seasons, you technically can't really skip any episodes, otherwise you'll miss out on small details here and there. And with this season, there is one episode that you can actually skip called Warrior, but I'd actually recommend it. It's actually pretty cool. It has to do with the Warrior Angel comic, a comic that was introduced in Season 1 in the episode Stray. Lex is also a fan of it, and I think he owns like a rare first edition copy or something like that. The Season 7 episode Action is about the shooting of a movie based on the comic, and then it so happens to show up in this season again. And I believe it was in this episode that Lois Lane actually wore a Wonder Woman outfit, considering the network wasn't allowed to use Wonder Woman at this point in time. Plus, Zatanna's in it, and it was directed by, believe it or not, Allison Mack. She also directed an episode in Season 8 called Power, but between that and this episode, I think this episode is the better one. Virtually every season has an episode that can be treated as an event of sorts. This season has the episode Absolute Justice. Absolute Justice was a 2-hour special event, and it was originally produced as 2 separate episodes, but it was aired as a double episode and packaged as so on the DVD. This episode was amazing. It had Clark and Oliver team up with the Justice Society of America. Think of them as a sort of pre-Justice League superhero team. On this show it consists of Hawkeye, who's the leader, Stargirl, and Dr. Fate. And believe it or not, Doctor Strange from the Marvel comics is actually a Dr. Fate ripoff. I love Doctor Strange, but they're so similar, you can't deny that. Oliver and Hawkeye had some funny interactions with one another. The action was amazing, and Icicle was a pretty decent villain. It wasn't perfect, it was an obvious attempt to capitalize on Zack Snyder's Watchmen, which is an amazing film, and Hawkeye's raspy voice felt like a Christian Bale Batman kind of thing. It felt like they were going for that and it just didn't work. But nonetheless, it was a great episode and one of the best event episodes of the show. Plus, the second half was directed by Tom Welling himself, and out of all the episodes he directed, I think this is the best one. He did a fantastic job. And the finale was absolutely amazing. It left a lot of interesting threads dangling for season 10, and the final showdown between Clark and Zod, while short, was short and sweet. Now, my biggest problem with Season 9 is the fact that it rips off The Matrix in so many ways. From the black suits, to some of the visuals, to some of the fight scenes, and even the final showdown between Clark and Zod. While I love it, it has a lot of similarities to the final battle between Neo and Agent Smith in The Matrix Revolutions. But apparently the Matrix films ripped off a lot of the Superman mythology, so yeah. I guess it's full circle now. And some episodes aren't particularly great, or they're a bit ridiculous. I mean, the episode Rabid is literally a Resident Evil ripoff. But if you like zombies, you'll probably enjoy it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Season 9 of Smallville. Next time, we're gonna wrap up this retrospective by looking at the final season of Smallville, Season 10, and then it will be followed by a ranking video. So thank you all for watching, please be sure to like the video, share it and subscribe, hit the notification icon, be safe during this time, and I'll see you soon. Kneel before Zod.